Good day, I am Angeline de la Peña. So my report will go over in comparing how different states in Southeast Asia deal with the issues of political institutionalization and political development. So first, let us define political institutionalization. It is the process of institutionalizing politically and the process of developing or transforming rules and procedures that influence a set of human interactions. So, it is the rule adaptation or developing into a best practices. It is also a change of rule or replacing old rules with new ones. So, an example of this political institutionalization is the division of power, which is given to the executive, legislative, and judiciary. Another example is the power from the national government that is passed through the local government. So next is the political development. It is the development of institutions, attitudes, and values that form the political power of a society, reflect the passage of societies, and analyst preoccupation. So political development is identified also as the domestic attributes of constitutional order and political stability in the country, attained through the formation of a settled framework of government, reliable procedures for leadership succession, and a consolidation of the territorial administrative reach of government institutions. It is also defined as an endowment of coercive powers and the ability to command obedience. So, Southeast Asia. First is Vietnam. Vietnam is a deeply authoritarian state characterized by corruption, weak legal infrastructure, financial unpredictability, and conflicting and negative bureaucratic decision-making. So, Vietnam is operated based on trias politica, but as the institutions were dominated by CPV or the Communist Party of Vietnam, separation between states institution does not exist anymore, and after that the state is led by the elites, which directs and control all political process. And there goes the presence of reformists, which does not only create tension but also provide ideas around the development and implementation of policy. And then the Vietnam shifted from centralized economy, one-party state to more open economy, one-party state. Cambodia is dominated by one-party state, which is the CPP or the Cambodia People's Party. Cambodia is a centralized state influenced by Vietnam, as they were once occupied by Vietnam. When Hun Sen took over, he exercised a more pragmatic rather than ideological approach, in which he avoided rigid communist ideology to dictate state economic and social policy, Buddhism as the state religion, and the beginning of a small capitalism. So, in the 1993 result of Paris Agreement established constitutional monarchy with the king as the head of state but without executive power. The end of Cold War, an agreement to let US help led to the reestablishment of Cambodia's monarchy and electoral parliamentary politics. However, the Cambodia is under the control of military, in which it is used as a way to maintain the support of the people into a leader. So there is the power of politics and the power of gun, which somehow resulted into the political stability in the country. So political accountability and transparency remain a distant goal for Cambodia, and the compromise has become a feature of Cambodian political life. Laos is a autocratic government which became a French protectorate from 1893 until 1945. The independence of Laos was restored in 1953, and they were under the control of LPRP, or the Laotian People's Revolutionary Party. So the central government relies its power into the tribal chieftain to maintain the people support, to secure the loyalty of their people. And then the Theravada Buddhism influences social life and active link and respect for Sangha. They were ruled by the military, but unlike the other authoritarian government, they were less prominent abuse of power, maybe because of the more open relations between low-level officials and ordinary people. So next is Brunei, monarchical, ruled by sultan or kings. Concept of Malaya Islam Biraha, or Malay Muslim monarchy, is introduced as their state's ideology. They practice censorship, and there is an observant Islamic state in which they were in strict consideration of the Sharia. Myanmar is defined as a military government where military is felt in politics. However, in the decision of transitioning from authoritarian to democratic, and when the Tatmadaw is introduced, it softened its restrictive political conditions, where the military is concentrated into the external conflicts and Tatmadaw assists the internal conflicts. The country becomes a liberal state where economic reforms are initiated, hoping for political reforms to happen soon. But Myanmar as of now is into the process and still evolving and becoming into a democratic state. So next is Malaysia, a multi-ethnic and multicultural society sizing a authoritarian style. To address the multi-ethnic society, UMNO was established for Malays and non-Malays. The attempt to form a national integration, Barisan Nasional, is formed in consideration of class interest. The success of Malaysia is highlighted in the regime of Mahathir Mohamad, in which political stability is achieved into the constitutional to deliberative, in which power sharing between elites from different social groups. Singapore is populated by Chinese migrants, Indians, and Malays, dominated by single party, PAP, or People's Action Party. Multiracial Singaporean identity and public policies were pursued aimed at uplifting all citizens after its expulsion from the Federation of Malaysia. It is led by the PAP and the Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. Singapore is a parliamentary democracy where a balance between democracy, domestic stability, innovative economic growth is seen, and Singaporeans have generally been supportive of this distinction. Meritocracy in Singapore, which gives opportunities like education to those who can afford and can't afford, but the consequence of this, however, is the standardized which those who are late bloomers cannot reach. Therefore, elitism and social segregation exist. Philippines, a democratic country once colonized by Spaniards, Americans, and Japan. In the Marcos era, from unitary presidential constitutional republic, it shifted to unitary semi-presidential under totalitarian conjugal dictatorship in which the legislative and the judiciary became a tool in achieving the interests of the then President Marcos. Freedom was only felt in the Freedom Constitution or the 1987 Constitution after the People Power Revolution, which gives the power from the national to the local, in which local government can impose rules. The political system of the Philippines is a US type but as a unitary rather than a federal. It is a trias politics wherein there is the separation of power in the executive, legislative, and the judiciary. Indonesia, colonized by Dutch and Japanese, becomes independent since 1945 from Japan and was formally recognized as independent in 1949 from the Dutch. In the parliamentary democracy period, the state has no control over society, but the state began to control society under the guided democracy of President Sukarno, and in the Suharto regime, in his authoritarianism, unitary state control of society established, and the government had all the social political organizations except Pancasila. In the post-Suharto stage, thoroughgoing social control mechanism by the state was lifted, and the period of reformacy, social organizations are given freedom of activities and obtain freedom to appeal to the government. And in this period, Indonesia departed from authoritarian and shifted to a democratic system. Thailand is a monarchical constitutionalism as a form of government and a parliamentary system as the system of governance, where the king is the head of state and prime minister as the head of government, and establish hegemony of state power over civil society, and strengthen and legitimize institutional power of the military in general. It was the main instrument of state capital accumulation, resulting in the creation of a strong bureaucratic intermediate class, and they establish a clear and concrete historical imaginaire and a state ideology. It then regulated state-society relations through specific codes of conduct and legal measures which clearly define political and economic boundaries. This made possible integration of the state, the nation, the regime, and leadership into one imaginary entity above constitutionalism. Military were not only for the protection of the state and the people or a defense against a conflict, but military are also felt in promoting political stability. Party politics. Thailand is a multi-party system, but traditional political parties have seen their role reduced in the parliament since military-led coup. Democratic practices in Thailand was held in March 2019, where the first national election is held. Media under government and military control are free to criticize government policies and cover instances of corruption, but prohibits reporting anything that could be deemed critically of the royal family. Timor became independent in 2002 and exercised parliamentary republic. Shanana Gusmao is elected as the first president, and the territory achieved a full status as sovereign state shortly thereafter. The period of cronyism and corruption is a result of poor governance, wastefulness, and inefficiency. To address this crisis, the government then focused in building infrastructures, but it only did little to improve. They then realized to invest more for human capital, as it will be essential for boosting productivity, pivotal for economic, and vital for democracy. Human capital can mainly be built through the education system funded by state. Transition to democracy. Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index in 2017 ranked Timor-Leste as the most democratic country in Southeast Asia based on 65 indicators. In an article, they seen three political change in Southeast Asia. First is the transformative change, a gradual and peaceful process that normally occurs in the framework of democracy, which implies a consultative and consensus-making process. Second is the revolutionary change, a confrontational and violent, which implies an explosion from the lower depths of society. And the third is the change in terms of reform, from the top down, imposed on the general population. There is a common feature among these three scenarios, which is the existence of a small group of prime movers and organizers, which is the elites. Accordingly, all Southeast Asia's emerging democracies are characterized by legitimacy crisis, weak rule of law, and unstable structures of socio-political representation and integration. This was clearly demonstrated by the collapse of democracy in Cambodia, the military revolts in the Philippines, the successful military coup in Thailand, in civil war-like clashes in Dili, the capital of Timor-Leste. The region's autocracies, on the other hand, differ significantly one from the other. Semi-authoritarian regimes, such as Malaysia and Singapore, have relatively high degree of statehood, yet illiberal structures. The deeply rooted authoritarian systems in Laos and Vietnam are governed by socialist one-party regimes. In contrast, Brunei is ruled by a traditionalist monarchical autocracy, and in Myanmar, a military regime determines the country's political fortunes. That is all. Thank you.
Okay. Hello. Good afternoon, guys. This is my report now from the approaches to state decentralization, public administration, and governance sa Southeast Asia. So, daghan ni siya yung mga factors no sa isa ka state sa Southeast Asia dili ta mag-tackle about sa decentralization sa isa ka country o sa ilang public administration o sa ilang the way sila mo govern sa ilang country. So, okay, let's get started. So, decentralization, no? Uh, Kani siya, nagkuha ko ani sa isa ka study. Kay, usay nang lisod ko kuha sa mga uban bitong kwan. What I mean sa sources sa panghatag ni ma'am. Taas kay mga explanation. So, kani, nagkuha ko ni isa sa mga uban study. So, kani, sa Andrea, isa ni siya ka trend, no? Decentralization. About ni siya sa 1980s na mga times during sa Cold War. And mo na yung mga decentralized na mga states na nag-take og reforms during sa mga after sa Cold War o during sa Cold War, so dire then mo ni gi-explain diri is ay lahang pag divide sa power sa isa ka state dito sa centralized na power ilang gi-devolve, no, devolution, no. So dire diagi pang devolve nila. So decentralization, no, as a general kwan sa Southeast Asia, diri nakan diri countries na yung mga colonial past ipang subjugate sa mga colonies like sa kwan Vietnam, Indochina na sa una ug sa mga state na para sa Philippines, no, isa po na siya nag-decentralize sila sa ilang colonial past. Sa tuwa is natay tulo ka stage diri from Spanish era to American and Japanese, then nag-decentralize ta mo ni karon na ingani to ang country. Then sa ubang countries po sa Thailand and Nepal na sa mga history sa colonial rules sa mga British, no. Then after few centuries nag-devolve lang mga state, nag-decentralize sila. Yeah. Then moving on sa next slide, kay decentralization. So mo ni ang chart na explain diri yung sa conceptual framework niya sa decentralization, no, na political, na fiscal, administrative. So during sa past colonial period nasa yung mga gipang features na mga centralized administration na namjo na sa una, like kana mga ilang mga isa ka centralized government na nag-control sa colony. Then after na nag-deconstitution sila, ang ilang mga important elements kay mga isa sa mga development sa devolution, no, kautong gi-explain sa una, devolution yun sa pag-devolve sa isa ka centralized na state o unsay mga structural change niya dia sa ilang the way sila mag-govern sa ilang civil society o sa ilang state and region governments, yun sila pag katag-katag sa mga buhatonon. Then moving on sa decentralization sa context sa Philippines, no. Decentralized Philippines, no, government kay diri nag-decentralize from National Capital Region to our autonomous governments, no, sa Western Mindanao, Southern Mindanao. Mo ni naghatag sa Constitution 1973, naghatag og taxes, no, tong 60-80 na impose na tax revenue sa kada state, kada region. So diri po, no, devolve from municipal to barangay to regional, no. Diri na po tayo mga supervision sa monitoring sa mga barangays ng gagmay o kato mga dagko na provinces na dagay attention sa mga individual sa citizens, no, gipang devolve ta sa mga gagmay na barangay to provinces, no, ana ang state of decentralization sa Philippines. Na moving on sa Hong Kong, no, kaning Hong Kong is isa ka special administration ni siya sa regions sa People's Republic of China. Bali mura siya kanang gamay na probinsya sa China na specialized siya na sa sariling governing body. So mura siya during niya sa kan after sa ni kanang sa Chinese rule ay kanang communist rule sa China na during sa Sino-British Joint Declaration of 1984, dili gi-declare na Hong Kong na ma-return to China, no, kay tungod sa basic law that city constitutional document. So diri ang ilang capital system kay gi-regard na as a high degree tungod sa ilang pagkaunlad sa ilang economy sa Hong Kong. So diri consider lang na dako na siya na political economy under 50 years kay ang Hong Kong jud isa sa murag economic giant sa Southeast Asia. Then the Sri Lanka isa po ni siya diri na po sa mga history there is district administration, no, from reconstructed to the federal authority. Medyo tas-tas na siya na siya yung mga history sa mga centralism failure kanang ilang pag-promote sa ilang centralized government unitary bukan siya mo end up na failure tungod sa dagan na mga attempts na mga corruption isa po ni siya. So public administration, no, isa ni siya pod sa mga isa sa mga organized society, isa sa mga accomplishment sa human society na mas ning taas silang hierarchy tungod sa aning mga diri nag-evolve diri tam explain ta diri evolution sa mga public administration sa C. So naa siya yung mga types, no, na traditional, classic phases. So karon na namta sa modern, dili ta mag-focus sa modern phase na natay pat ka stages. So natay first development administration, the second the new public administration, and the third the new public management, reinventing governance, and the public administration as governance. So moving on sa next slide. Okay, so nangata sa context sa public administration sa Philippines, no? Ang atuang public administration is natay similarity sa mga past colonies na to, sa mga past colonizers na to, like sa American Constitution na atay similarity, ug sa Spanish era na atay similarity sa graft and corruption, and during sa Japanese era na mga colony. Do napot tay mga bagong practices na gina-practice karon sa tuwang public administration sa mga cultural values, more norms, and sa the way ta mo sa politics, no, more ni ang the way sa Filipino public administration practices. So diri naga-adapt tag mga improvised na mga improvised ways sa atuang public administration. So moving on sa public administration sa India, diri medyo tas-tas ni ilang period sa public administration kay gikan sa mga Vedic period na nasa lay mga nag-evolve ang ilang public administration. So diri from 1947 na under sa British rule, nag-evolve din na po diri tungod sa ni Gandhi iyang bali revolution niya na during sa after sa World War II, diri na nabuo ang mga other reforms. So moving on sa public administration sa Thailand, diri kay medyo ni siya complicated tungod sa daghan kudeta during sa mid 19th century. Nag-transition ilahang from feudal state to to modern state na jud, from daghan na jud sila yung mga reforms, and aside sa reforms nato sila daghang coups, no, yan under sa mga coups kay mag-establish sila new constitutions tungod kay mo maning gusto sa mga political elite sa Thailand, no? Gusto nila tarong na system. So diri governance no, diri nata sa governance. Diri nag-explain diri ang governance sa Southeast Asia no, from mga evolving government nag-kuan sa democracy. So diri governance sa Philippines no, nata diri mga natay mga stages governance nato nag-evolve from Marcos era to from pre world from pre post World War II and Marcos era and sa Corazon no, diri nag-explain ng mga democratic na for reforms and sa tuwang institution sa tuwang country. Then next slide is government sa Thailand. Diri ilang constitutional monarchy from changes from sa mga kudeta o mga political religious na mga groups na naga-persuade sa demokrasya sa Thailand. Sa ilang military run government heaven for the kanila ilang king sa ilang chief of state. And okay, sa governance sa Hong Kong diri ga-explain diri is ang ilang way of sa kana ilang governance pag sa China bitaw bali kasi ni ilahang pag persuade na dili sila sa Chinese under sa Chinese rule na nasa autonomous nasa autonomy sa sariling central government sa Hong Kong. So ato medyo na-explain na po siya sa pikas na katong public administration. So so this is the end of my report now. Thank you for this.
Good day, everyone. My name is Sharjin A. Flores, and my assigned topic is to compare the democracy and participation of Southeast Asia in terms of party system and election. I also included monarchy and socialism in Southeast Asia. Objectives. By the end of this topic, I should be able to compare the concept of democracy, party system, and election of Southeast Asia, Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, and Myanmar. Also, compare the monarchies in Southeast Asia, Brunei, Cambodia, Thailand, and Malaysia. And lastly, compare the Socialist Republic in Southeast Asia, party system, in terms of party system and election, Laos and Vietnam. What is party system? Parties make for a system, then only when they are parts. And a party system is precisely the system of interaction resulting from inter-party competition. That is, the system in question bears on the relatedness of parties to each other, on how each party is a function of the other parties and reacts competitively or otherwise to the other parties, according to Sartre, 1976. And also, political parties is defined as political groups identified by an official label that present at elections and is capable of placing through elections free or non-free candidates for public office. Party systems. Two-party systems, one-party system, multi-party system. There are the category of party system. And types of parties: elite-based parties, mass-based parties, ethnicity-based parties, electoralist parties, and movement parties. Political parties in Southeast Asia have developed in very different ways from their counterparts in Western Europe, shaped by historical constraints such as colonialism and post-colonial authoritarianism. Many parties in the region are poorly institutionalized without deep roots in society or strong organizational apparatuses. In terms of the Philippines is the oldest democracy in Asia, a republic headed by a president as both head of state and government. The Nacionalista Party and the Liberal Party was characterized by factions, and party switching was common. In the year 1946, the Liberal Party split from the Partido Nacionalista, which had emerged as a dominant party until 1947. A two-party system emerged under a system of functional bifactionalism. The two parties were mere organizational vehicles for local elites and candidates who sought office through election, but they did not develop into effective organizations representative of mass politics. Within the two-party system, party switching or truncation became predominant. During the martial law period, the Kilosang Bagong Lipunan or KBL of Marcos dominated the hegemonic party system. Though there were other minor parties and a number of traditional politicians attempted to promote the United Nationalist Democratic Organization as a credible, non-communist alternative to the regime, left-wing groups affiliated with the clandestine Communist Party of the Philippines played an important role in anti-regime demonstration after the assassination of Benigno Aquino Jr. in 1983, but the traditional political parties remained sidelined in the mass protests that led to the downfall of Marcos in early 1986. So in the Philippines, the parties are derided as full of tapus, short for traditional politician, but with the added meaning of dirty dish rag in Tagalog. Parties remain the electoral vehicles for political clans or families and almost exclusive focus on the recruitment and electoral function. Policy-oriented ideological parties with mass membership do not exist. For the most part, parties are political machines and electoral vehicles for office seeking and lack the ideological appeal or party platform that would link them with social groups and provide a voice to the populace. The cadre aske and decentralized nature of political parties in the Philippines has allowed personalism, clientelism, and kinship ties to prevail among the party members. The Philippines, the president has the most powerful position because of his or her power to disburse development funds and jobs. In addition, by lengthening the presidential term from 4 to 6 years and cutting the term of the House of Representatives from 4 to 3 years, both elections only coincide every 6 years. This has weakened the bandwagon effect under which voters focus on parties that run the most promising presidential candidates during congressional election. So in the Philippines, political landscape is peopled by television presenters, singers, and sports great for laying their charisma and star power in political office. And our example here is Katniel. Also, it is common in the Philippines that after election, for Filipinos to observe a mad rush out of losing groups or party in towards the party of newly elected president. So moreover, the introduction of the party list system has contributed to the chaotic state of party politics in the Philippines by creating a second parallel party system. In the Philippines, ethnic, religious, regional, or socio-economic levities do not seem to have a strong effect on the party system. With the exemption of the outlawed Communist Party of the Philippines and a few smaller party groups, no political party represents the class cleavage between workers and owners or between the rich and the poor. So according to 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines, Article 6, Section 5, the party list representative shall constitute 20% room of the total number of representatives, including those under the party list. For 3 executive terms after the ratification of this Constitution, 1/2 of the seats allocated to party list representatives shall be filled, as provided by law, by selection or election from the labor peasant, urban poor, indigenous cultural communities, women, youth, and such other sectors as may be provided by law, except the religious sector. So, ballots have historically required writing in candidate's name or in present, filling in the circle for up to 40 offices, putting the focus on individual rather than the parties. The election system, the president and vice president are selected not in party slates, but as individual. Since 1973, the voting age has been 18 and compulsory voting was abolished. Election in the only natural-born citizen of at least 25 years old for the House of Representatives and 35 years old for the Senate and 40 years old for President can register as candidates. Elections in the Philippines are synchronized, which means elections for about 40,000 national and local offices are held on the same day. The Commission on Election, or COMELEC, founded in the 1940s, is responsible for voter registration in the organization of election, vote counting, and notification of the result and the resolution of election complaints. The 24 senators are elected under a plurality at large voting system in one national district. Senators serve terms of 6 years each. The terms are staggered so that one half of the seats are up to election every 3 years. Violation of the integrity of the election includes substantial problems with vote buying, bribery of polling officials, ballot stuffing, voting in multiple districts by so-called flying voters, manipulation of voters' registries, and election-related violence, especially in local election. So, Singapore. Singapore is a parliamentary republic. The president, who is the head of state, and prime minister, who is the head of government. Communist Party of Malaya and Anti-Communist Chinese Nationalist Party and Progressive Party in 1947, as well as the Labor Front and the People's Action Party in 1954. The PAP is a cadre party that recruits its members and candidates based on strict criteria and after a careful screening process. The 1968 election completed the transformation of Singapore's competitive multi-party system into a hegemonic system. So the party organization has different tiers. At the top is the Central Executive Committee, and the second tier consists of roughly 1,000 party cadres who are appointed by the CEC. CEC and cabinet are recruited from the ranks of co-opted military, economic, and administrative elites, that is, the technocrats. The PAP has experienced profound ideological and sociological transformation in the past 6 decades. Multi-party elections have been the hallmark of electoral authoritarianism in Singapore since 1959. Multi-party elections in Singapore are free but not fair. Elections serve the self-reproduction of power in 3 distinct ways. First is election provide the PAP with the procedural and input legitimacy for its rule. Second, multi-party elections serve an informational rule as well. Third is election are a tool for the PAP and its government to co-opt the opposition through mechanisms like non-constituency MPS. In 1955, Singapore adopted the British electoral system of plurality vote in single-member constituencies. Compulsory voting was introduced in 1959. The government is free to schedule new elections during the 5-year parliamentary term, but elections have to be held within 90 days after the dissolution of parliament. Registered voters with a residency of at least 10 years are eligible for parliamentary office. So, candidates for the presidency must not be a member of political party, required to have served as a cabinet minister or senior official in the government administration. So first, the PAP makes extensive use of gerrymandering. Second, all political parties are barred from canvassing for votes outside the official campaign period that only lasts 9 days, one of which is cooling off day, during which all campaign activities are forbidden. Third, rigid limits on campaign financing and limited opposition access to the media, especially since official media have a pro-PAP bias, also contribute to uneven playing field. So, let's move on. Let's go to Indonesia. Indonesia is the largest among the countries in the Asian region in terms of territory. A republic led by a president who is both the head of state and the head of government. In 1986, Pancasila was established as a single basis for all parties and societal association, further compressing the ideological spectrum. Nationalist Party is Sukarno Nasionalista Party of Indonesia. Islam, NU and Masyumi. Javanese Traditionalists, Socialists, Democrats, and Communists. Okay, United Development Party and Partai Demokrasi Indonesia. National Awakening Party or PKB, Modernist, National Mandate Party PAN, and Modernist Islamist, Prosperous Justice Party, Indonesia Democratic Party of Struggle. Muna siya mga party sa Indonesia. Indonesia has transitioned from a hegemonic and non-competitive party system in the late Suharto era to an extremely fragmented multi-party system with two dominant parties to an extreme multi-party system with a balance of power among parties. Skeptical observers stress that Indonesia parties have become more personalistic as a move from a party-centered to a more candidate-centric electoral system in 2009 freed candidates from their party platform and offered them incentives to campaign on their personal attributes and local connection. In Indonesia, parties are routinely criticized for their seemingly endless internal squabbling, their poor parliament track record, high levels of corruption, and lack of progress towards formal institutionalization. The introduction of direct executive election has shifted voters' attention to the presidential race and has generated incentives for the creation of new parties, whereas decentralization has empowered branch-level actors and increased electoral localism. Finally, Slater's account of coalition politics reveals the existence of an inclusive party cartel formed to minimize the risk of election by ensuring access to power and state resources for all parties. Indirectly elective People's Council with limited advisory powers in 1918, the first general election to the legislature was held in 1955. In the period 1999 to 2003, introduced generally free and fair direct election for president as well as for both chambers of parliament. Since 1999, there have been 4 rounds of election for the DPR, 3 election to the DPD, and 3 direct presidential election. The minimum voting age is 17 years. Married person can vote regardless of age, whereas members of the military and the police do not have the right to vote in election. At least 21 years of age profess a religious belief and possess a high school degree. For presidential election, presidential and vice president candidates, as noted, are elected on one ticket in 2-round system. Only parties or coalition of parties that win at least 25% of the national vote of comprise 20% of the seats in the national parliament can officially nominate candidates. The electoral system used for the DPR is proportional representation with closed party list. In 1999, restricted open list in 2004, and since 2009, open party list is in multi-member district. The Election Commission allocates seats among those parties that have obtained at least 3.5% of the national votes using the Hera quota method, while the allocation of remaining seats to political parties is based on the largest remainder. Since 2001, the General Election Commission is responsible for organizing election at the national, provincial, municipal, and district level. Despite these and the other problems such as illegal political financing and vote buying. So, Myanmar is a constitutional republic headed by a president as both head of state and government. One party, the AFPFL, was at the forefront of the Burmese politics after 1945. The party enjoyed a monopoly on power that reflected its strong support, especially among the Mar voters, but it suffered from factional conflict. NLD and a few ethnic or pro-regime parties survived the authoritarian crackdown that followed the election. Buddhist monks, civil servants, and state employees and members of the Tatmadaw cannot join a political party. Buddhist Socialist Program is National Unity Party. Emerged in the National Unity Party. So according to Article 39 of the Constitution prescribe a multi-party system for the Union, although parties can be banned for treasonous activities, abuse of religious for political purposes, or of directly or indirectly receiving, expending financial, material, and other assistance from a foreign government, a religious association under other association, or a person from a foreign country. Requirements for registration are quiet law. Political parties must have at least 1,000 members, possess 15 executive committee members, and run in at least 3 constituencies. Most parties are small, and many focus on their ethnic base. Only USDP, LLDP, NUP, and the National Democratic Force have a national presence. Center, periphery conflict between pro-military and pro-democracy parties. Political parties can be grouped into 3 blocks. First, the block of pro-military parties includes the National Unity Party, or NUP, and the UUSD. The majority of political parties belongs to the second, heterogeneous group of ethnic and regional parties. The third group of political parties comprises parties that trace their origin to the 1988 student movement and the 1999 election, includes several small or tiny parties, the NLD and the NDF, the latter of which broke away from the NLD in 2010. Elections were regarded as free and fair, whereas there were no elections from 1962 until 1974 under the 1974 Constitution. Only candidates from military, Buddhist, Socialist Program Party could run into elections. The 2008 Constitution introduced multi-party election for the Union Parliament and the regional and state assemblies. Candidates can run under a party banner or as independents. According to the Perception of Electoral Integrity, or PEI Index, the 2015 election achieved the second highest quality score among the 7 Southeast Asian countries in the project. Suffrage is guaranteed for all natural-born citizens who are at least 18 years old, but Article 392 specifies important exception to voting rights, for example, for members of the Buddhist Sangha. Natural-born citizens aged 25 for 30 for the upper house or older are eligible to stand in election if Myanmar was their general residence for the past 10 years, while the Union Election Commission is responsible for voter registration as well as organizing and managing the election. All parties could campaign freely and were given access to state radio and television. Candidates can file an election complaint with the Commission, but this procedure again requires a considerable fee. All national and sub-national legislatures are elected by a system or plurality ruled in single-member district. So, we move on to monarchies in Southeast Asia. So, first, Brunei. Brunei Darussalam is an independent sultanate, headed by a sultanate. Its government is absolute monarchy, and the sultan is both the head of state or the ceremonial leader and head of government or actual ruler. Brunei is one of the only 5 states in the world that does not hold any kind of representative national election for the legislature. Pan-Burnian PRB was founded in 1956. The PRB so far is the only political party to develop a party ideology and preside over an organized membership base. Only full citizens are allowed to be members of political party, and members of the public service or the armed forces are prohibited from joining parties altogether. There is no formal party law, but political parties are regulated under the Society's Order of 2005. Since 1962, political parties are not allowed to nominate their own candidates in national or local election. Members for the Legislative Council, village elders, and district heads are elected as individual. Cambodia. Constitutional monarchy. Cambodia is a constitutional monarchy headed by a prime minister and a king who is elected from a number of candidates with royal blood. Cambodia party system has stabilized an asymmetric two-party system with the ruling CPP in the power in the sea and the CNRP dominating the opposition, leaving only limited chances for other political parties to win seats in election. The CPP is a successor of the pro-Vietnamese People's Revolutionary Party of Kampuchea, which ruled Cambodia from 1979 until 1981. The CNRP is often described as the highly alternative to CPP dominance. The party is highly personalistic and clientelistic in character, exhibits strong anti-Vietnamese nationalism, harbors weakly institutionalized party structures, and has a rather limited membership. The National Party Congress meets every 5 years and elects the Central Committee of the CPP. The electoral strength of the party rests on its control over local political arenas. CPP cadres use state infrastructure during election campaign to mobilize voters or oblige officials such as the police or teachers to engage publicly for the CPC. Universal mail and famous suffrage was introduced in 1946 and 1956. From 1946 to 1992, there were 10 parliament elections, 1 presidential election, as well as 5 national referenda. Since 1993, there have been 5 general elections for the National Assembly, 3 commune-level elections, and 2 indirect elections for the Senate. The institutionalization of regular multi-party election. The lack of integrity of the electoral process, the slow playing field in a political milieu that prizes partisanship above neutrality and impartiality. The core of the current electoral arrangement for the National Assembly were established by the United Nations, which introduced a proportional representation system with mostly multi-member districts in the early 1990s. Under the 1993 UNTAC election law, the number of legislative seats allocated to each district was proportional to its estimated population. So the UN election law selected the greatest remainder formula, LRA, here. According to this system, the initial seat allocation gave each party as a whole number of seats based on its proportion of the vote. The most important feature of the electoral arrangement for the National Assembly is the choice of the province as the electoral constituency. Since 1993, elections in Cambodia have assumed an empowering role in defining the country's political outlook. Unlike in Vietnam, Laos, Singapore, and until recently Myanmar, elections in Cambodia are competitive and provide voters with the opportunity to express their support for or displeasure with the ruling party's policies and performance. Thailand. Thailand is constitutional monarchy also, ruled by a king who is currently the world's longest-serving head of state and longest neighboring monarch on Thai history. Thailand is governed by the National Council for Peace and Order, a military junta that presents the army, navy, air force, and national police led by General Prayut, who was Army Commander from October 2010 until October 2014. The formation of Thai parties was influenced by three political and institutional factors. First is the vertical centralization of political power and access to state resources within the unitary organized state. Second is the horizontal decentralization of decision-making authority between state agencies and cabinet ministries, and the dispersion of political power within oversized multi-party cabinets and functionalized political parties. Five relative features of Thailand political parties and party system is: first is the high party system fractionalization. Second is the key feature of the Thai party system is its regionalization. Third, key features of political parties in Thailand concerning their weak institutionalization and the encoded nature of the party system. Fourth, intra-party factions are essential actors in Thai party politics. Fifth, Thai political parties generally follow two models: the leader-dominated party and the country party. The 2017 Constitution grants suffrage to all citizens aged 18 or older, excluding Buddhist monks, novices, and nuns. Candidates for the House of Representatives and the Senate had to be at least 25 and 40 years of age. Vote buying, corruption, and political party financing are still considered key problems in Thai election. From 1983 to 1996, Thailand had a multiple non-transferable vote system, also known as black vote, with the constituencies of 1 to 3 seats and an average district and magnitude. The black vote gave electoral premiums to smaller parties and undermined the party cohesion and the value of party organization, as voters were free to vote for as many candidates as they had votes. The 1997 Constitution introduced a system of parallel voting where voters participated in two separate elections using different systems. 400 seats were allocated in a single-member constituencies by plurality rule, whereas the remaining 100 were allocated based on closed party lists. The result of the single-member district did not affect the result of the party list election, as voters would cast two votes, one for the candidates in that district and one for the nationwide party list. Malaysia is the only federal state in Southeast Asia under constitutional monarchy. Its king, known as the Yang Dipertuan Agong, who is elected to 5-year term by and from among 9 hereditary rulers of the Malay state. Prime Minister is the head of government. Communist Party of Malay, or CPM, founded in 1930. The CPM operated as an illiberal organization under the British colonial rule, staged an armed insurgency against the Japanese occupation during World War II, and fought a guerrilla war against the British authorities and later against the Malay government between 1948 and 1960. The party's electoral base is in the rural and conservative north of the Malay Peninsula, where it has governed the state of Kelantan and formed coalition government in Terengganu and Kedah. In comparative perspective with the rest of the region, the Malaysian party system stands out due to the four dominant features. First is the emergence of multi-party politics in Malaysia occurred along existing social cleavages, which had a strong and lasting effect on the formation and organization of the party system and patterns of political competition among parties. Second is, compared to most other national party systems in Southeast Asia, Malaysia party system is relatively well institutionalized, and patterns of competition between parties as well as party voter alignment are relatively stable. Third is, contemporary Malaysia actually has a dual party system, one for the Malay Peninsula, West Malaysia, and other one that emerged is Sarawak and Sabah, East Malaysia. And the last one, there has been a remarkable increase in the degree of party competition in Malaysia since the late 1990s. The country used to have a stable hegemonic party system in which the UMNO or UMNO as the main ruling party and the lead organization of the Barisan Nasional controlled the electoral arena together with its component parties. In contrast to most other party systems in Southeast Asia, political parties in West Malaysia have also achieved organizational stability, durability, and autonomy, are more or less well linked with society and have reasonably strong organizational roots among their respective electorates. Most political parties in West Malaysia exhibit a lower degree of internal democracy in terms of the participation of the parties' rank and file, particular with regard to candidate selection, policy selection, or inter-party decision-making concerning coalition and formation. The party system of Sabah and Sarawak in eastern Malaysia differ from West Malaysia in important ways. First is political party organization did not arise until in the early 1960s. Second is, in contrast to West Malaysia, where the UMNO dominates the BN, the United Traditional Bumiputera Party or PBB, the Sarawak United People's Party, and the Sarawak People's Party are the dominant members of the Sarawak Barisan Nasional Coalition. Third, religious and ethnic leaders do not overlap to the same extent as on the peninsula, although parties still have an ethnic flavor. Though elections in competitive authoritarian regime are entirely free and fair, they are more than just a faked and are generally free or massive fraud. Even though elections are accepted as the primary means of gaining power, incumbents' abuse of the state places them at a significant advantage vis-a-vis their opponents. The basic rules of the electoral system were formulated prior to independence for the first federal election in the Federation of Malaya in 1955. All Malaysian citizens aged 21 or older hold suffrage. Voter registration is voluntary and takes place at the district level. Candidates for parliament can be by political parties or party lists. Non-party candidatures are also permitted. The Raid Commission therefore proposed a system that was to be based on three institutional pillars. First is the introduction of a system of plurality rule in single-member constituencies that privilege the Malay communities and the UMNO in particular. Second is the acceptance of weightage for area for rural constituencies. Third is the Raid Commission wanted to establish an independent electoral commission appointed by the king that would monitor voter registration, the conduct of election, and be responsible for the appointment of electoral district every 8 to 10 years. Electoral gerrymandering has eroded the principle of one person, one vote. The ruling coalition also introduced a stronger rural weighting in between 1974 and 1986, even removed any legal limits to it, leading to a situation where the electorate in urban district was sometimes 5 times the size of that in rural districts. So, the last one is the Socialist Republic in Southeast Asia, Laos. Laos is People's Democratic Republic, is a single-party socialist republic with the Lao People Revolutionary Party, the only legal political party. Lao PTR is led by President as head of state and a Prime Minister as head of government. So, Lao People's Revolutionary Party, it is organized as Leninist Cadre Party, was modeled after the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and Vietnam. and adheres to the principles of democratic centralism. Since 1972, the party is structured along territorial and sectoral lines, meaning that the party is present in provinces and districts as well as in mass organization, the armed forces, and the state organization. Party members is necessary to gain access to most government positions in each mandatory for offices in the Lao People's Army. Until the early 1990s, a significant degree of provincial autonomy emphasized the party rules as the rule centralized state organization. Membership is by personal invitation only. A member selection is subject to prior screening of aspirants by party organs. Its 685 delegates in 2016 elects the Central Committee's currently 69 members and formally decides important party matters. The party leadership consisted mainly of two groups of ethnic Lao. The first group is consisted of men who belong to the old aristocratic elite of the country or were connected to prominent family clans by intensive family ties, representing the party to the outside world. The second group that formed the key leadership is, however, consisted of party cadres and military commanders who remained in the political underground until 1975, who were in the close contact with the Vietnamese communists and all become known to the Republic after the overthrow of the royal government. One of the striking features of the party elite in Laos is their continuity and hegemony. Other unique feature of the LPRP compared to other socialist countries is the over-representation of military forces in the party's lossy of political decision-making. Under the current political regime, popular election for district, provincial and local assemblies were held in 1988, and since 1989, elections for the National Assembly are held every 5 years. Under the Constitution, all citizens aged 18 or older are eligible to vote, and citizens aged 21 or older have the right to stand in the election. But the LPRP is the only party permitted to contest the election. All party, state, and mass organizations can propose candidates to the National Election Committee through local election committees, according to Article 9 in 1997 election law. The National Assembly election used a system of plurality ruled in 18 multi-member constituencies in which voters cross out the names of candidates they dislike. Vietnam. The last country is a Vietnam. So socialist. Vietnam is a single-party republic ruled by a Communist Party of Vietnam, led by the President as the head of state and Prime Minister as the head of government. Through its network of party organization in all the administrative units and the dual function of party cadres as party representative and state officials, the CPV has complete control and authority over politics. In addition, the Central Committee of the Communist Party and the CPV's Politburo are the supreme decision-making bodies. Since 1988, the CPV is the only legal political party in Vietnam. The CPV is a Leninist cadre party modeled after the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. First is democratic centralism as the key decision-making practice and disciplinary policy. Second, monolithic unity of the party with strict party discipline and a ban on factions and collective leadership. Since 2006, party members can become entrepreneurs and business owners can apply for membership in line with the adaptation of multi-sector economy. Delegates have very limited actual political influence because the party executive committees prepare all political decisions ahead of time. The National Party Congress is the supreme party organ. Since 1976, a party congress has been held every 5 years. The delegates consist of lower party units and members of the party's central committee as ex officio members. Provincial party committees, mass organizations, and party chapters of different sectors such as the military, state administration, government apparatus, and state-owned enterprises nominates the delegates. The Central Committee of the CPV holds at least one plenary session every 6 months, and there were 61 plenary sessions between 1982 and 2010, compared to only 36 in China. Until 2011, the Politburo nominated and the National Congress confirmed full members and candidates for the incoming Central Committee starting in 2012. Party members could nominate themselves. The year 2016, Congress returned to the old system of predetermined nomination under which candidates succeed if they are supported by at least 2/3 of the delegates. National representative elections to the legislature were held every 5 years. There is universal suffrage, but election in the Democratic Republic of Vietnam before 1976 and the Socialist Republic of Vietnam since 1977 have been neither free nor fair, and only candidates approved by the Vietnam Fatherland Front are allowed to run for office. In the 2016 election, 870 candidates stood for elections, including 97 non-party members, down from 118 in 2011, and 11 candidates who were not nominated by state or party agencies, known as self-nominated candidates, down from 15 in 2011. Voting is de facto mandatory because on election day, local party cadres and state officials knock on everyone's doors to remind voters to go cast their votes. More than 500 members of the National Assembly are elected by a majority two-round system in 184 constituencies. Since 1987, there have to be at least 2 more candidates in the ballots than there are seats to allocate in a district. Local selection committees have to take into account mandatory quotas concerning educational and ethnic backgrounds, gender, place of origin and residence, profession, membership in functional groups, mass organization or economic sector, and so on. Obviously, elections play only a minor role for the selection of political leaders as a mechanism of political participation for the citizen and their ability to hold the government accountable for its conduct. So that's all. Thank you for listening and God bless.